We have Cassie joining us here as well. Cassie Adkins, all the way from, did you say Virginia, Cassie? Is that where you're at?
I did.
Yes, Cassie joining us from Virginia here. So listen, we're going to continue a deep dive segment here. Felix, there's your sound cut for our next segment here. We're going to get into the science of engineering high performance teams. And most leadership training fails for one reason. They focus on managing chaos instead of transforming it. I'm going to tell you, Richie, Johnny, in my experience, a lot of the folks I work with, we have a habit as humans to always react. Man, if you're reacting, you've already lost. You got to find a way to be proactive. Today, you're going to learn the science behind systems that turn struggling teams into high-performing powerhouses. Cassie, let's start with something tactical. When you step into a merger situation, you're going into one today. Let's pretend you are. What's the first sign that tells you a leadership team is stuck in chaos? And then what patterns expose the problem before it explodes? Cassie Adkins.
So, as silly as this sounds, the tense in which they're talking, if they're talking about past tense, what happened yesterday, what they need, again, it's in that reactive state. It's so telling versus today we've got da-da-da going on, or we need to make sure we X, Y, and Z to be prepared for. So the words that they use and whether they're referencing the past, the present, or the future. Because like you said, if you're busy putting out fires, you're certainly not in the present, and you sure as hell aren't in the future. You cannot merge two companies and live in the past. You need to be able to live in the present and very much view the future. So you have to stay ahead. You have to be able to be present and aware. You can't stick your head in the sand. You can't just ignore things. And you have to learn from what you are reacting to, right? If you have there are going to be fires. So look at that fire and say, okay, how can I keep that fire from ever happening again? How can I be proactive so that's not a fire that I'm dealing with? Because every fire we're not dealing with allows us to be present and looking to the future.
So this is great because this is tactical for both. I got a question actually for all three of you now, which is fantastic because I think this is a really good conversation to have. So Johnny was captain of a wrestling team and was captain. Richie was in the military.
That was a strength team, not a wrestling team, for the record.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Just playing.
Yeah. So Johnny, you got leadership teams. Richie, you got leadership teams. You got different cultures of coming together as a couple military units. Cassie's got a company over here, a company over here. Johnny's got guys over here, different cultures. The most important thing, those competing priorities. This is common. What's the system for turning that chaos into alignment? And actually, I'm going to start with you, Rich. So you got two military units coming together, and you can look at them and you're like, holy fuck, their priorities over here, their priorities over there. How do you bring them together, Richie? And then I'll throw the same question to you, Cassie.
So I think the first thing you have to do is you have to build trust. And with me, so I was actually brought in to take over a unit that they were just awful. And so when I went into each of the subordinate units, they had no idea what their purpose was, what their mission was. And it was a very important mission. They were there to support the drawdown of troops in Iraq. This was in 2011. And they had no idea. If they fucked that up, then we were going to have to delay troops because they were the most southern point coming down. So what I did was I went in and built trust. And so once I did that, then I can say, hey, look, here's how important your specific job is. This is what you're doing. And so from that point forward, once I built trust and they knew how important their role was and what they were doing and how much it mattered, they could care less about what they thought their priority was. It now aligned with what mine was and the rest of the team. So that in my experience, that's how you do it.
Cassie, it seems so obvious, so simple.
So I'm going to layer onto that.
Trust,
after
Cassie?
you can get them to trust you, you have to get them to trust each other. Because once they realize that at the end of the day, we are all humans. We are all likely, there's overlap in the goals and priorities. Maybe the how is different, maybe the who, what, where, when, all of those details. But at the end of the day, we all want to be successful. We all have our own definition of that. But that desire to be successful, to achieve greatness, to be corny, like that unifies teams. And if you can get people to, again, air it out and speak on what would be successful, you can then start to see how similar people are instead of dissimilar. And when you're similar, you build that trust and you begin to be vulnerable and transparent. And when you like, respect, and trust someone, like Rich said, you somewhat forget about your priorities and realize that there's something bigger that you're aiming for. And that allows you to go in a uniform direction.
Johnny.
Yeah. So it's, I guess, to me, I like to boil shit down, make it simple. So it's a universal language that everybody, no matter where we're from, if we're trying to be successful, we all have to get into this. And it's the fact that there's a certain level of us being in the present, right? But it's an interesting combo because we have to be a little bit in the past and a little bit in the future, but not so much, because what we need is right here. But we have to be in the future enough to make sure that we're planning the next steps, so the next bit of present goes smoothly. But we also have to get a little bit into the past to make sure that we learn from whatever mistakes we made. So there's you're just this little toggle.
Yes.
And when you keep everybody toggling right there, it unites people really fucking fast. And I think the key is that it's just the toggle. It's like to put it into a number or quantify. So you're never really more than, say, a half a step into the future, maybe 3/4 of a step into the future. So you can plan that next action or whatever it is. And you're never really more than about a half a step back into the past, because you just far enough back to learn, not go back to dwell on what might not have worked. And so you just got to get that toggle down. And sometimes that toggle, if things are going really well, you might be taking a closer to almost a full step into the future and barely a little into the past, because things are going so well moving forward. There's not much to look back to learn, but your toggle is based upon performance. And so you just got to understand that. And people get way too engaged in one side or the next. They lose the present. Now the whole thing blows up.
Cassie, I can't help but think about Richie as Johnny's telling that story, because Richie is sitting with his team in Iraq and he's having to communicate with them what they need to think about over there, while at the same time remind themselves to stay safe and live today. And Richie, it really is that balance, isn't it, Rich? It's like you're having one side on each side of the line. So Cassie, when you hear John explain that, and there's a lot of truth to how he explained it, isn't it, Cassie?
Yeah, and that toggle, we're gonna all go back to childhood for a minute. We all played on a seesaw.
Yes.
Okay, I had 3 brothers. We did a lot of seesaw. Now, it's all fun and games till someone gets hurt. Then it's just funny. But think about when you're on the seesaw, right? But who remembers, okay, picture yourself, you're on this seesaw. You don't weigh the same as the other person on the other side. So you've got to it's this game to find the perfect balance of where you need to be on the seesaw lever to achieve balance. And then you achieve it and you get so fucking excited that you've achieved it that you move and you lose it. And then you have to regain it, right? But every time that you move, because movement happens, you work to counter it. And if your brother is a jerk and decides to move back, you've got to react and counterbalance that mistake or that action to create balance. And that's what I pictured the entire time you were talking, John. It's just this
It's
working
totally a
with
seesaw.
working with each other to create that balance. Because, and again, much like you said, everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. There's going to be people on your team that are really good at executing. There's going to be people that are really good at the visionary piece. There's going to be people that function really well in the mornings. There's going to be people that are late night. Like, it is about finding how you balance on that seesaw together. And as things shift and change, everyone needs to likely shift. Because if you're in La La Land and you don't shift when everyone else shifts, as a team, as a unit, you're not balanced anymore.
That's it. You are hanging out with Rich, Johnny, Keith, and Cassie Adkins here, Mornings and Live with Keith and Friends. And at this time here, Cassie, we start moving into the lifestyle segment. So, Cassie, are you able to stick around for more of the show, or do you got to rock and roll out of here today?
No, I'm totally here.
All right, so Cassie's gonna stick around with us, which is gonna be a lot of fun. So I'm not gonna say goodbye to Cassie yet.